Mother Earth. We will be covering the summit all week. But right now, we return to our coverage of the 10th anniversary of the water wars in Cochabamba. Hundreds of people through this week have been marking this decade anniversary. On Sunday, I met up with Marcela Olivera. She served as the key international liaison for the Coalition for the Defense of Water and Life. Her brother, Oscar Olivera, led the coalition.
If the government doesn't want the water company to leave the country, the people will throw them out.
We're standing in the town square where it all began 10 years ago here in Cochabamba, Bolivia. I'm with Marcela Olivera. She was here when the battle against the privatization of water began. And Marcela, it all began with this banner?
Yeah, that banner was hanged there when the conflicts start.
What does it say?
It says, "The water is ours, damn it."
The water is ours, damn it?
Yeah. And we tried to put the word carajo because it was a strong way to say, because they didn't understand. We were telling them all the time what water meant to us, and they didn't understand. So that was the strong way to tell them we are not going to step back in our demands. Well, it started with the campesinos. The campesinos were the first ones that realized that the government was trying to impose, is trying to pass a law that will affect their rights about water. So they were the first ones that came to the city and they told us this is going to happen if we let this law to pass. They are going to privatize our water sources. They are going to privatize our the wells that the communities own. They are going to privatize the water system in the city. So this law is going to affect all of us. They knocked the doors of the factory workers, the Federation of Factory Workers, because they were the ones that were giving sort of a political line in the city. You know, now they were doing a job for several years denouncing what was happening in the factories. So they came here and they found the workers that wanted to help in this. But also they found a very important group of what I would say academics, intellectuals, that could really read the law and understand how this will affect the people in the future. So these were the main groups that got together here.
Your brother, Oscar Olivera, who also became, if there was one face of this movement, it was certainly his. He was in the factory, he was among the factory workers?
Yeah, he was in that time the leader of the Federation of Factory Workers. The movement themselves didn't call them leaders of the movement. We call them spokespersons. And there were also several levels of organization. So we, for example, know if they were going to put them in jail to the first level that were the spokespersons, there was another level that was going to take over the leadership of the movement. So there were several, the coordinadora was organized in several levels.
How did Bechtel come to Bolivia?
Well, the government did call for a concession, for an open, they sent an open invitation to companies to come to the country. As far as I know, 3 companies present their papers, but 2 back up afterwards. Bechtel was the one that stayed. It was a consortium, actually. There were some local businessmen that participated in this consortium. And they decided to take over the water system. The signature of that agreement was actually in this building in front of us. When they signed that agreement, there was a small group of protesters in these stores. And Banzer, who was the president at that time,
had been the long-time dictator before he was elected.
Exactly. When he heard the people protesting outside, because people does that with fireworks, he said, "Oh, I am accustomed to hear that kind of music in the background." And he didn't think that the music will be really loud several months later. The first mobilizations against the privatization of the water system and this law started to happen in November, December from 1999. They were very small, sporadic, but they were growing.
This is when the Battle of Seattle took place, actually.
I think we on that time we didn't realize that this was happening at the other part of the world. So it's good to see how later those struggles connected and both were successful. But that was in 1999. In January, there were still protests. We shut down the city for several days. The officials from the government came here to negotiate. Nothing, no result happened from the negotiations until February. And 4th of February, we called to the people to a mobilization here. We call it La Toma de la Plaza. That was the takeover of the plaza. For us, that was like a party. It was going to be a party because it was going to be the meeting of the people from the fields, the countryside, coming here and meeting the people from the city, because it was a demand of the people from the countryside and a demand from the city. So we planned to do this with music. Several groups were hired, and it was going to be really a party. And we designed the things the way that we are going to come together here from the 4 points of the city. One was in that direction. The other came, the Cocaleros came from the one bridge. The neighbors from the south came from the south. There were the Federation of Factory Workers. All the workers came from a plaza near here, so it was all getting together here at one time. The government said that wasn't going to be allowed to happen. Several days before this was going to happen, they sent policemen and cars and motorcycles that were surrounding the city, trying to scare the people. And the actual day of that mobilization, they didn't let the people walk even 10 meters, and they started to shoot them with the gases. Many of us, I'm sure, went back to our houses, and we saw on the TV what's happening in the morning and what was still going on. We said, this cannot happen. They were beating women, they were beating children, they were throwing gases to people. So we stood up and we went to the streets that afternoon, and many people from the city that wasn't being part of the mobilization suddenly joined, and we were hundreds and hundreds of people trying to take the plaza, because we said the plaza is ours. Why we're not going to take it? And it was more than a battle to get something. It was a battle to occupy physically a space that we consider was ours, and we had the right to have this space. That didn't happen. For one day, it was awful because they threw rubber bullets to people. There were many wounded. And something that we didn't expect is that the next day, people will mobilize again for the same thing. We thought, oh, it's over, it's night, everybody went home, nothing is going to happen. But no, next day, the Cocaleros that were staying here, they came from the field, they came from Chapare.
Led by Evo Morales.
Exactly. They were the ones that took over again the streets and tried to take over the plaza again. And that inspired to other people, students and neighborhoods, and we all came here that Saturday, and we took the plaza finally. And it was a huge victory, I think, because we could agree with we was signed an agreement with the government, and they froze the water bills and created a commission to negotiate with Coordinadora the terms of the contract with Bechtel. At some point in March, when we get to March, we realized the government wasn't going to do anything, and they were just trying to gain some time. So what happened in March is we called to a popular referendum. This is not something that was contemplated on the Constitution. It wasn't legal, but we believe it was legitimate. So many volunteers put tables in many parts of the city, but also in the countryside, and we had 2-3 clear questions. One was, do you want to make changes in the law, in the legislation about water that reflects the demands of the people? The other question was, do you want Bechtel to leave our country? And the third question was, do you want the water company to return to public hands? And 98% of the population answered, we